Greetings. I'm Brother Bryant from the Congregation of Israel, the Biblical School of Global Liberation for all oppressed peoples. I am also a representative of the NMP, the Nazarene Messianic Party, and I would like to welcome you all back to another installment of our book reading and dialogue. And we're continuing reading on a book titled Pedagogy of the Oppressed by author Paulo Freire. And before we get started, as always, I'm going to read a psalm. And tonight, I'm going to actually read Psalms 72. Psalm 72 out of the King James Version of the Bible. So if you have your Bibles, you might want to grab that real quick, and we're going to read Psalm 72. And it reads, "Give the king thy judgments, O God, and thy righteousness unto the king's son. He shall judge thy people with righteousness, and thy poor with judgment. The mountains shall bring peace to the people, and the little hills by righteousness. He shall judge the poor of the people. He shall save the children of the needy, and shall break in pieces the oppressor. They shall fear thee as long as the sun and moon endure, throughout all generations. He shall come down like rain upon the mown grass, as showers that water the earth. In his days shall the righteous flourish, in abundance of peace, so long as the moon endureth. He shall have dominion also from sea to sea, and from the river unto the ends of the earth. They that dwell in the wilderness shall bow before him, and his enemies shall lick the dust. The kings of Tarshish and of the isles shall bring presents. The kings of Sheba and Seba shall offer gifts. Yea, all kings shall fall down before him. All nations shall serve him. For he shall deliver the needy when he crieth, the poor also, and him that have no helper. He shall spare the poor and needy, and shall save the souls of the needy. He shall redeem their soul from deceit and violence, and precious shall their blood be in his sight. He shall live, and to him shall be given of the gold of Sheba. Prayer also shall be made for him continually, and daily shall he be praised. There shall be an handful of corn in the earth, upon the top of the mountains. The fruit thereof shall shake like Lebanon, and they of the city shall flourish like grass of the earth. His name shall endure forever. His name shall be continued as long as the sun, and men shall be blessed in him. All nations shall call him blessed. Blessed be the Lord God, the God of Israel, who only doeth wondrous things. And blessed be his glorious name forever. And let the whole earth be filled with his glory. Amen and amen. The prayers of David, the son of Jesse, are ended. And that was Psalm 72. Psalm 72. And tonight I'm going to take my time due to the fact that my section is not really too lengthy. I'm almost at the end of chapter 1. I picked up after Comrade RJ, and I'm just going to do a little, not a little, but I'm going to do a recap, take my time with it, and then I'll go into the reading because I have a lot of time. I only have 3 more pages, but I just wanted to talk some talking points about what we went over so far in chapter 1. And when Comrade RJ, if you guys have visited the YouTube channel, the Nazarene Messianic Party, all of the previous recordings are posted, so you can keep up with the conversation and the dialogue of the book reading. And right when Comrade RJ was switching over the reading to me, he left off at Mr. Paulo Freire mentioning this new man. And as I begin to read, Mr. Paulo Freire was talking about what basically brings about this new man, right? And we started to see Mr. Freer had talked about critical intervention. And this critical intervention is the same as critical reflection. And during this critical intervention, uh, man, man and women, they realize, through historical and current situations or current realities, how their actions constitute what we see on this this planet as far as the social systems. So during this critical intervention, man begins first to see his relationship towards this society, towards this system of exploitation and oppression. This is something that man sees, right? Because he's going through this metamorphosis. He was oppressed. He starts off as oppressed, but becoming this new man, he starts to study the world and he starts to study things around him, and he starts to do a reflection, going into that consciousness and starting to realize what part he plays, or what actions as mankind as a whole, what do they play in the deterioration or the destruction of society, which is, seen through capitalism, right? But we start to see, as this man is going through this metamorphosis, or this oppressed man is trying to become this new man, if you will. As he's going through this metamorphosis, he's faced with a lot of different situations. One being his unstable mindset, and Mr. Freer mentions the duality, right? Whereas though being in his oppressed consciousness, he desires to, be away or be separate, or even to destroy the oppressor. But on the other hand, he wants to be like the oppressor, right? So he's going through this back and forth in his mind. And remember, this is all during this process of him during the critical intervention process, and him reflecting, right? And the reflection is in order to bring him to an action or to a praxis, as Mr. Freer had mentioned. But he goes through this stage of duality where he wants to be like the oppressor. He also hates the oppressor. And then with his hate for the oppressor, we start to see Mr. Freer mention about how they, the oppressed really don't have this courage. They really don't have this backbone, if you will, to not naturally, excuse me, but to really stand up against the oppressor. So what they do is that on a small scale, like around the neighborhood or even on the job, towards other neighbors and other co-workers, they express their aggression or their frustration to other oppressed people, or to other proletariats or working class, or to other exploited men and women that are in their condition. And this happens because of the duality, because they want to be like the oppressor, but on the other hand, they love the oppressor, and then on the other hand, they want to destroy the oppressor. They got a lot of stuff going on in their mind, because that's what the fruit of this situation is, of exploitation. It makes the oppressed dependent upon the oppressor. That's how it was designed. So although he's dependent upon him, he really doesn't want to be dependent on him, but because he is, it makes him frustrated. And that frustration is not taken out on the oppressor because he fears the oppressor. Why? He's dependent on him. So he feels though he can't do nothing about the oppressor, because then how he going to eat? And I mean, how he going to survive? So that all of this is creating all this turmoil and all this confusion in his mind, but yet and still this turmoil and this frustration, this confusion is acted upon, and Mr. Freer mentioned in the book, is taken out on, again, his fellow what's it called? His neighbors, of course, but his also the word escapes me right now. In other words, like your co-workers, right? He takes this out on them or other people that are part of the oppressed class, never really addressing the oppressor. We also seen how Mr. Freer mentioned to us that let me get this real quick. I'm sorry about that. Excuse me. Mr. Freer had mentioned to us that the oppressor goes through this particular stage, as well as that when this new man is trying to reinstitute a new society, the oppressor might think that, now he's being oppressed because he can't, I'm quoting from the book, he can't read Beethoven and he can't go to expensive and luxurious trips and stuff like that no more. And Mr. Freer cleared that up with us, is to show you that, no, he's not really being oppressed. He says that oppression only is when somebody takes your ability away to become fully human. Somebody is like blocking that. Somebody is stopping you from the pursuit of happiness, if you will. So oppression doesn't mean that, now that the oppressed is getting their education, now that the oppressed are learning and they're going to this full human consciousness or this awakening, and now they're basically taking power back from the oppressor. The oppressor might call himself being oppressed now, but that's not really what's happening. What is happening is that, and Mr. Freer mentions it, what's happening is that the oppressed, they were once dehumanized. They're returning back to being human, right? And he mentioned something. I want to get that real quick. Give me 1 second. I want to get that because he mentioned something very important about that I want to bring out. Because I saw this and I was thinking about the scripture when he mentioned this. 1 second here. I had it underlined. I don't know why I lost it, but yeah, he mentions let me make sure this is it. Since the person who struggled to resolve the contradiction, they were caught. I believe this is it. So yeah, he mentions how well, this is not it because I think I lost it. Oh, 1 second, bear with me. 1 second. This is a point I wanted to make. It's very important. Well, let me just read it for, and maybe that I can bring the thought back together. But he mentions I'm not sure what page it is on your page 30. He was mentioning that it is only the oppressed who by freeing themselves can free their oppressors. The latter, as an oppressive class, can free neither others nor themselves. It is therefore essential that the oppressed wage the struggle to resolve the contradiction in which they are caught, and the contradiction will be resolved by the appearance of the new man, neither oppressor nor oppressed, but man in the process of liberation. If the goal of the oppressor to become fully human, they will not achieve their goal by merely reversing the terms of the contradiction by simply changing poles. And that's why I mentioned how the oppressor would argue that once when we take back our humanity, that now he's being oppressed because now he can't dominate anymore. But that's not what it's, because we're not trying to change poles. No, we're trying to make all of us become fully human. And that's not actually what I want. Let me, I think I know where it's at. Give me 1 second. Because he's going to actually use the language of dehumanizing. That's what I really want. Give me 1 second. Bear with me. This is a point that I want to make about the dehumanization. Okay, here we go. This is what I think I want right here, because it's really important. Yeah, when he mentions how the process of liberation must not employ the methods of dehumanization. And I can't find it for some reason, but he mentions it all throughout the book, this method that the oppressors use. Like, in other words, when they're trying to help us or when they supposedly want to help liberate us, he said it'd be a contradiction. They can't really help liberate us because they don't trust the oppressed class. They're not really working with us. They don't think that we have any ideals because they view us as objects, as things. In other words, we're not even we're not even human beings. We're objects and things. And he made this point, and the reason why I wanted to find it, I couldn't find it. I don't know why I couldn't find it in my notes. I underlined it, I'm sure, but nevertheless, the reason why I wanted to bring out this point is because I was starting to realize that Mr. Freer's argument is correct when we think about the Exodus and we look at what's it called, the Pharaoh. The Pharaoh, because Mr. Freer talks about the dehumanization process. And the Pharaoh, although he told Moses, after he saw the mighty acts of the Almighty and he saw the different plagues, he told Moses, okay, you and your people go ahead. But because the Pharaoh was still in that state of and Mr. Freer mentions it, that sadist state, or that love for necrophilia, the dead, the non-living, inanimate objects and stuff like that. He couldn't really recognize that what he did to the Hebrews, making them put all these different bondages on them, not bondages, but all these different tasks, making brick and mortar. He couldn't realize the oppression and exploitation. He couldn't see the suffering in it. Why? Because he becomes, like most oppressors become, necrophiliacs, obsessed with, the dead, obsessed with, in other words, taking away people's living. I want to get that real quick because I gotta explanation a little better if I pull out a definition. I'm sure he I'm sorry, I don't know why I'm getting a little flustered here. I had the definitions, but nonetheless, the point that I was trying to make, I'll probably come back around to as I begin my reading tonight. But Mr. Freer argues about how when the oppressor uh, begins to lose his strength, he starts to become human again as well as the oppressed. We both start to become human. And I was bringing up the point about the necrophilia is because um, most people that are obsessed with the dead, he mentions this. He mentions how they're sadists and they don't see life. They don't see people as living. He said, and this is a quote. He says, "Humanity is a thing, and they possess it as an exclusive right, as inherited property. The oppressor's consciousness the oppressor, consciousness, humanization of others, of the people, appears not as the pursuit of full humanity, but as subversion or overthrowing him." So when the Hebrews started to, relearn and started to subvert or getting ready to overthrow Pharaoh, they were gaining their humanity. They were becoming human again. But because Pharaoh himself, I would argue, wasn't human. He was obsessed with death. He was obsessed with inanimate things. He was looking at the people like objects, not even alive, because that's what dehumanizing means. A person that is. Let me get that real quick so we can kind of go over the definition of dehumanize really quick here. Let me grab that because I want to show you what did Merriam-Webster say about dehumanizing. And I'm not taking my time because of the simple fact that I don't have much to read this evening. But when I was looking at dehumanize, I was looking up synonyms and antonyms of dehumanize. And it says to make someone feel or behave more like an animal than a human being. And when we look at Pharaoh, his dehumanizing of the Hebrews. Mr. Freer argues how, the oppressor, by him dehumanizing people and him turning people into objects, he himself also becomes dehumanized, or he becomes like this animal, or like this savage man, if you will. And now this savage man, he has no, an animal, from what I understand, animals don't have no recollect of, life and death. You know what I mean? It's just survival. It's just, that's all it is, to them. Trial and error. They try to hunt. If the hunt is unsuccessful, they try something different to get food. It's just trial and error with animals. They don't have no, they don't have no notion of life and death. So they're like animals. They're not human. You know what I mean? And Pharaoh, uh, when you start to look at it, that's the reason why, he was like that towards the Hebrews, because he was dehumanized himself. Like when the Bible says that his heart was hardened, because he wasn't thinking on a human basis. He wasn't thinking like man think. He didn't see life in the Hebrews. He saw them as objects, as things. They were inanimate to him. So, and the reason how I know this is because Mr. Freer argues the fact that the oppressor cannot lead an authentic revolution. Why? Because Pharaoh didn't know what it was like to be, hewers of brick and mortar. He didn't know what it was like to mix these elements together and make these stones and to carry them. He can't, in his mind, he has nothing to, in other words, he can't relate to the Hebrews. So to him, what he was doing, he couldn't see that it was wrong. But if he did see it was wrong, I'm arguing that what Pharaoh would have done is he would have left Egypt with the Hebrews to go serve their God, this God that was promising no more exploitation, no more hierarchy, no more oppression. So the Pharaoh went out and chased them and, tried to bring them back and, seize over them again. And eventually we know the story, how they were choked in the sea. But I'm arguing if the Pharaoh was human, if he didn't have that hardened heart, if he wasn't dehumanized, if he wasn't this animal-like, if he didn't have this animal-like mentality, then that wouldn't have been the way he handled things. But we see in that instance how Mr. Freer is arguing that the oppressor himself, he has been dehumanized through his acts of oppressing others. Because why? He's obsessed with dead and inanimate things. He doesn't view things as alive. He doesn't even not constitute, but he doesn't even acknowledge life. You know what I mean? Everything is just an object. Everything is just the thing to him that he can, either possess it and make profit of it or whatever. But even when it comes down to human beings, they're nothing to him. So we see Pharaoh's heart being hardened, and we see that Pharaoh couldn't lead the revolution because of that fact. He couldn't help Moses and them go out because he was himself also, excuse me, he was dehumanized. He had lost his humanity through practicing oppression. And also we were reading, I want to get one more point. uh we was reading about the fatalism and the docility, and how this happens over time because the oppressed become dependent. And Mr. Freer was arguing how one of the things that the oppressed must do is they must learn to become independent, and this only happens as they go through the critical intervention, or they go through the critical reflection. Because why? The critical reflection, it constitutes awareness. We're reflecting things, right? Again, like I said, when I first opened up, as we're reflecting, we're remembering, and that's all in the consciousness. We're becoming aware, and we're becoming aware of our relationship historically and currently to the present social order, and how mankind has built everything, how mankind has created all of this suffering, how mankind has created all of this exploitation and death and so forth and so on. So when this man is going through this intervention in his mind, and he starts to see that he became docile and he became dependent, he won't realize those things if he just, and Mr. Freer mentions it, I'm just, going right into it. He won't realize these things if we just, look up slogans, and, we just have these different, catchphrases, or like he said in the book, we just have like propaganda, going on for the destruction of capitalism and the institution of a new society. He said that it won't happen like that. No, the oppressed really have to have meaningful dialogue with other oppressed peoples. They have to all be on one accord, even the leaders. And he's going to mention that in tonight, the portion I'm going to read, how the leaders of this pedagogy, right, of this re-education, the leaders themselves, in order to be true leaders, they can't have that way of thinking as if the other people around them that don't come up with the ideals, aren't smart and they're dumb. No, everybody has to have the same amount of education. Everybody has to be on one accord. This is how it works. If we don't do it that way, then what we'll do is, as he just mentioned, we'll go back into the old poles of things where you have higher class and you have lower class, or you have people that know and people that don't know. You'll have the rulers and savage man. So no, what Mr. Freer is arguing is that this pedagogy, once it's taught amongst all the oppressed, or if we read other works like from Mr. Karl Marx, we'll read that they're called the proletariat or the working class. Once when all the working class have the same amount of education, the same amount of teaching, they're all on one accord, then they can liberate themselves. Mr. Freer mentions that. And then also, if the oppressor decides to be liberated, he will as well. They have no other choice because his overthrown will be imminent, right? So this is what we've just been going over in chapter 1. How this new man, he must go through reflection, and as he go through reflection, he starts to see he has a duality in him, and that duality can be harmful if he doesn't address it. Why? Because that duality makes him want to be like the oppressor, whereas though he wants to get education and he wants to oppress next, or he wants to get education and he wants to rule over or dominate the people next. So that duality has to be addressed. So this man, or these proletariats, or these oppressed people, they must first get rid of that duality. They must first get rid of that duality, and they must come to an understanding of they are all in the same condition. They are all going through the same oppression. They are all facing the same struggles. And once they get to that, they can then go to the action or the praxis. But this only comes when they realize that they all have a part in it. And mainly their part is to be educated. Mainly their part is to recognize that they are the ones that are, in other words, fueling and aiding and abetting their exploitation and oppression. So I just wanted to give that quick recap. I'm gonna end it off right there because Mr. Freer is going to really bring the book home this evening, and you guys will see what I'm saying. I was going to go further into the reading because he in chapter 1 he constantly encourages to look at chapter 4, but I didn't, only because, not because I was, just not being lazy and studying. I just didn't want to go in chapter 4 because I feel as though it's important now that I'm understanding that the book is talking about the education of the oppressed. For me, I I learn better from dialogue. Like, when you guys interrupt and you guys say, "Hey, brother Brian, I got something to say." I learn better that way because that's how I've always been. Like, and that's what Mr. Freer is encouraging, that we all study and learn together. So I felt though if I went to chapter 4, if I read all the way through it, I did go to chapter 4 a little bit to see some of his points, but I felt as though if I read all through the book, me personally, I felt as though that I would miss all those genuine aha moments that other readers would have as we're reading on Thursday nights. And I wanted to have those moments so it could really be like, yo, we read this and we came to those same conclusions, live on Zoom together. So I wanted to have that moment. So I'm just mentioning that because a lot of things Mr. Freer is he's going to self-explain them. And as I read and take my time with it, you'll hear him explain it. Like, he'll make a statement, and right in the next sentence, he'll explain it. I'll elaborate as well. And I'm also going to add some scripture this evening, if God allows, if the scriptures come to me, because I was just writing so many scriptures down as I was reading through this week about stuff that's coming to my mind. But as I read it again, other scriptures come to my mind. So if the Almighty allows me to, I'll bring up the scriptures that I was pondering on as I was reading certain things. But without further ado, I'm going to pick back up where I left off last week. I was almost hold on a second. Let me get that. I'm not sure what pages. Again, I forgot. I lost track. I think it was 61 last week that we stopped off at, or either 62. But I, real quick, I'm just going to grab where I was at so you guys can kind of find me. I, um, excuse me, Elder Judah. Do you remember what page that y'all was on in the hard copy last week?
I think it was page 61.
Page 61. Okay.
Yeah, but
So
just read the first sentence, and they should be able to find it.
okay, so I'm gonna start off where it says, the oppressed must see examples of the vulnerability of the oppressor. And on my book, that's the page 38. But you guys should be able to find me. So it reads, the oppressed must see examples of the vulnerability of the oppressor, so that a contrary conviction can begin to grow within them. It says, until this occurs, they will continue disheartened, fearful, beaten, as long as the oppressed remain unaware of the causes of their condition. They fatalistically accept their exploitation. Further, they are apt to react in a passive and alienated manner when confronted with the necessity to struggle for their freedom and self-affirmation. Little by little, however, they tend to try out forms of rebellious action and working towards liberation. One must neither lose sight of this passivity nor overlook the moment of awakening within their unauthentic view of the world and of themselves. The oppressed feel like things owned by the oppressor. For the latter to be is to have, almost always at the expense of those who have nothing. And really quick, at the top of here, he said the oppressed must see examples of the vulnerability of the oppressor so that the contrary conviction can begin to grow within them. Again, he mentions this in previous pages of chapter 1. That conviction happens through the critical intervention. He's going to go into it a little bit more as I continue to read. You'll see what I'm talking about. He's going to bring up critical reflection and intervention again. But he's arguing that this conviction happens when we start to reflect and remember all of our deeds and all of our actions, which, in other words, gives life or animates this social condition, this social order. So he's saying that, again, he's saying that the oppressed must see examples of the vulnerability of the oppressor so that the contrary conviction can begin to grow within them. So we always talk about at the school, the elders taught us to study past revolutions or to read other books, which gives us more other books that gives us more examples on how to deal with the task at hand of destroying the capitalist mode of production and how to bring in a new society, right? Because when we read these other books, like, and I'm going to bring out a little bit from that tonight, Miss McMillan's books, Capitalism Must Die. When we read these books, these authors, and when we read different writings from Karl Marx and Frederick Engels, we see that they give us examples on how to deal with this, how to show the vulnerability in the capitalist. Where is it? Because sometimes we can't see. A lot of us, we aren't economists. We don't know how to, attack, their weakness. We just don't. We're laboring every day, right? We don't. As far as us becoming educated, us, getting these teachings, we're new to these things. We're the oppressed class. We work every day. We come home. We have dinner. May watch some TV, whatever. I mean, it's the typical routine. So when it comes to their vulnerability, to the naked eye, we don't see it as far as the oppressed class. So he said that we need examples of the vulnerability. So one of the examples, not examples, but one of the way we can start looking at examples is by studying past revolutions. How were these revolutions successful? Why? And why were they successful? Because they knew the vulnerability of the current dominating class, and they knew how to address it and strike a blow right at that particular time, which will ultimately cause that particular dominant class to cease, or in other words, dissipate. So we have to do the same thing. And then as we look at those past revolutions, then bring it up to today's speed. And, we get involved in more watching. You can't listen to everything they say in the news because everything isn't always true. So you find yourself a good news source or a news outlet. And then as you find that outlet, you start to listen to what the wave or the continual thought is going through media. And then you see if that is enough that you can come outside and maybe I don't know, either get people to organize around it, to maybe do some not tabling, but to maybe do some a solid stand or a march or a sit-in. But you see where the capitalists, or you see where this system is weak at. You see the vulnerability, and these examples help us, or they encourage us to say, hey, okay, we see that this is how we, antagonize the system. We saw many examples during the civil rights movement when Dr. King and they had the thing with the Rosa Parks and the bus, and they wouldn't spend their money with the bus, and they wouldn't spend, I forget the name of the bus company. And we have many different various examples that I don't want to name offhand and be all wrong and incorrect and say false information. But I'm saying, like, we have to study those things so we can see in the past where the vulnerability is, right? So we can have templates and models of where the vulnerability is, because if not, then we won't have any hope that we can do something about our condition, because again, we're constantly being given the propaganda that this is the way it is, you can't change it. But if we start to see examples where no, people changed it, people did something about it, then we'll say, okay, hey man, look, it's possible. This is very plausible. It's not something that's wishful thinking. It's not like it's a kid's dream or something like that. So I'm gonna continue to read, and it says, for the oppressed at a certain point in their existential experience, to be is not to resemble the oppressor, but to be under him, to depend on him. Accordingly, the oppressed are emotionally dependent. That's why I was mentioning earlier in my recap about them going through this stage of not being uh not being confident enough that they can be independent. No, they become totally dependent on the boss. And we hear conversations like that all the time. Like, if I quit my job, this and that third gonna happen. We're not self-sufficient because of course they have all the things that we need in order to survive, all our necessities. Well, at least they don't have them all per se, but at least that's how it appears as we are in this state of being oppressed, and we're trying to become this new man, right? Of course, as we start to go through self-reflection, we see that they don't really hold the keys to everything. But while we're uneducated and we aren't in these pedagogical classrooms and these education practices or processes, we don't see that they have vulnerability. We don't see that we don't see that ourselves being independent. We only see ourselves dependent on them, right? So I'll continue to read on. It says, the peasant is a dependent. He can't say what he wants before he discovers his dependence. He suffers. He lets off steam at home. where he shouts at his children, beats them, and despairs. He complains about his wife and thinks everything is dreadful. He doesn't let off steam with the boss because he thinks the boss is a superior being. Lots of times, the peasant gives vent to his sorrows by drinking. It says this total emotional dependence can lead the oppressed to what Fromm calls necrophilic behavior. Excuse me, the necrophilic behavior, the destruction of life, their own or that of their oppressed fellows. So again, that's that, necrophilic behavior. That's that also that argument he made earlier in a couple pages about the sadism, this obsession, this love for the dead, this love for things that are inanimate, right? And then
Brother
in this,
Brian,
yes, sir.
hey, if you don't mind, before we get too far, I'd like to rewind a little bit, if it's okay.
Sure. Go ahead, brother. Sure.
All right, in the beginning of this, of the paragraph when you first started, he said that the oppressed must see examples of the vulnerability of the oppressor so that a contrary conviction can begin to grow within them until this occurs. This will continue disheartened, fearful, and beaten as long as the oppressed remain unaware of the causes of the conditions they fatalistically accept their exploitation. I've seen examples of this real early in life. Um, I've 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 had a pretty crazy life so far, thus far. But when I was like, I'll never forget. When I was 18, I was in the service. I was in the Navy, and I was in the. I can't. If was I in the Philippines or Thailand, but one of those countries, and I was blown back by how adults. I'm a kid, so as a child, still at 18, even though you're a teenager and you're considered a grown man, and I'm serving the country overseas somewhere, you still can recognize when someone is your elder. And I would notice how they would flock to us, even as me being such a kid and depending on me because of their lack of resources and money and food and just things and provision, basically. And I'll never forget that. And that back then I couldn't understand it. It stuck with me, and over the years, and it stuck with me, and I never forgot that the way I felt at that time. Like I said, I didn't understand it, but it was strange. It was very strange, and that's all that was is just what he explained here. That the the people in those countries, wherever we were, they were disheartened. They were fearful, and they felt beaten. And the only way, like, they had to wait for ships to port to draw themselves together, to gather all the things that they had produced themselves that they can sell, or the women to do whatever it is that they would do to get money, but they waited on us because they felt so beaten and so fearful, like nothing could happen, like nothing could save them. And so their savior became strangers of their lands. And also, I'm gonna just shoot down just a little bit. He says, hold on, he says, further, they are apt to react in a passive and an alienated manner when confronted with the necessity to struggle for their freedom and self-affirmation. Little by little, however, they tend to try out forms of rebellious actions. Now, that's also an example to me. Just that little sentence there when it says, little by little, however, they tend to try out forms of rebellious actions. That all depends, in my opinion, on the generation before them. each one tries a little bit, and whatever works, it sticks, and they function off of that. So little by little is a progressive state that they're in. Little by little is not a specific time. It could take a decade. It could take a whole generation. It could take a huge amount of time. It could take a small amount of time. But little by little, you're inching. Progress is being made off of the things that those before you have previously tried. And so little by little, the generation behind you becomes more confident. But see, what disturbs me now, though, is that with our people, looking back over generations, sorry about that, looking back over generations, and we've seen those struggles, and we've seen the practices attempted. Some win, some fail, as Brother Judah would talk about, like the people before you have done certain things to give you certain rights. But what troubles me now is that we look back, or the generation after us have looked back and seen the progress, and instead of adding to the progress, they now want to become and join unto the mind state of the oppressor. And thus, that's why everything seems to me to be so wound out of shape and so violent and so super aggressive, and all of these different things that are not good to the progression of the oppressed and their continuation to build on those building blocks that the ancients before us have laid. And so I just, this sticks out to me because I don't know if I'm explaining it well, but I know what I'm seeing, and I know what I'm hearing when I'm reading this with you, that because it's just shooting examples of my lifetime back into my face and making me look at it and try to understand what, through my experience, what I can pull out of it. But I just wanted to bring that out, man, and just stop you for a second so I wouldn't get too far before I lose the little bit of thought that I had on that subject. Thank you.
No, thank you. And when you was mentioning about being overseas, as well as when you mentioned the second portion, to me, the reason why that was so great is because it's kind of like validating what Mr. Freire is saying about this critical reflection. And because now that you're becoming this new man, right? You're going through that process of this critical reflection, this state of becoming aware. This consciousness is starting to come back to you, where you're becoming human again. You see these things, you remember these things. That's what he was telling us, that once when we start to remember, once when action becomes a preoccupation and an occupation, that's what will lead us to true praxis. That's what will cause us to go forward into true action, a true revolution. I'm sorry, what you ready to say, sir?
Yeah. Now that's the ideal thing. What you just explained, that's the ideal thing. And for me, it came later in life, only because essentially, like I said, those actions of those people were strange to me. But when instead of me coming home and remembering what I had saw and acting accordingly to try to use that as a base to springboard a type of change, and not only in my life, but those around me, I became bitter and angry because when I came back, now I'm those people. I felt oppressed and angry and bitter and lashed out. Well, thus, here comes another experience in my life to where imprisonment. They got a place for the angry, they got a place for the undesirable. And I seen those places too. And so now here I am 50, now I'm trying to learn or starting to accept what I should have learned when I had the actual experiences right in my face at those moments. And so in a sense, I kind of rejected the information of the world that I had seen. And instead of looking more into the educational portion of it as to what this really is and what I can do to stand against it, I became bitter and angry. I never really wanted to join it, but I became angry. Well, I guess I did want to join it, because as I became angry and bitter, I did want the things that they had, just so I could say, now I have it. Forget you. I don't need you. You know, but I still wasn't looking for those things to uplift all humanity, all people. Now I'm bitter and angry at my oppressor, and I want to take his things from him. And at that age, I didn't know what with a lack of education, I didn't know what I would have did with him. So I thank God that he didn't give him to me, because I don't know, I probably wouldn't be here today. But yeah, that. Go ahead, brother, continue.
No, man, that's some powerful stuff, man. And I gotta call you, man, on some private times to rap to you, man, because that's a powerful testimony. You know what I mean? And man, I guess I could say better late than never, right? But it's interesting how you said that, yo, man. I wanted to do something, but you couldn't place it, so therefore you was angry, and you was angry at the oppressor, but you never thought about getting education. It's interesting how that works. You know what I mean? It's not like that you didn't. I'm sure you didn't want the education. I'm not sure. I can't speak for you, but I'm saying, like, I think that when stuff hits us like right all of a sudden, the last thing we think about is that, well, let me educate myself on this. I mean, now I think that way after I've been around, brothers like you and the elders. When I see new information, when I see new things, I want to, inform myself about it. But I had to be taught to think like that, because, like, sometimes you see new things and you don't even investigate. So yeah, I get what you're saying about when you saw all that was going on. It's like, you was mad at it, but it's like you wasn't mad enough, I guess, in other words, to do something about it. Is that what you're kind of saying?
Yeah, I wasn't mad at it, like, for instance, I had a personal conversation with Brother Judah one time about how I was at a crossroads as a youth, with this information here, or just the beginning portions of it, and the rebellious worldview of it. And we placed it in the arena of music. I had you had Public Enemy and you had NWA, back in the day. Now, Public Enemy and Poor Righteous Teachers, those type of groups, I love those groups. I love what they were doing. But NWA seemed at that point in that period in my life to be more rebellious, more, I can get more done. And I made the wrong choice, because maybe good looking into Public Enemy's music and following that chain of thought would have led me into a whole different area, to where the mistakes I made by following the other side, I wouldn't have made, because I would have been starting to understand what I was thinking, seeing, feeling, and hearing. So I don't know. It's every man's choice. I just praise be to Yah that I'm still here, that I can now get it right, hopefully. And I'm just, I'm thankful for that.
Amen. Absolutely, brother. Hallelujah. And yeah, I totally agree with you. I feel the same way. I'm glad that I'm here. I consider amongst, the comrades, brothers and sisters that are really, you know, searching and really trying to understand what to do, and, how to effectively do it, and mainly how to do it the right way. Of course, be effective. But no, that's some good dialogue, brother. And please, by all means, if you need to interject, just come right on in. And before I continue, did anybody else have something they wanted to bring out or say?
Oh yeah, I would like to say, He also mentioned the desire to rebel against the situation. He said the
Yes, sir.
oppressor, they will rebel. And that's the type of it. The rebellion, you're angry, and we will lash out. But even though we're rebelling without some type of a guide, we can make the wrong decisions. So you may have some people who rebel, let's say in the days of slavery, they little forms of rebellion against the oppressor. It probably would be to destroy crops, or to spit in the master's food, or to cheat, take extras. These are the different forms of rebellion that will form. Which it's another text by a individual who talks about the peasantry and their rebellions. They're small rebellions, and it has something to do with that. They will sabotage crops, or they will, steal things. And so this is what we have in different areas where we're angry and we will rebel against the system. But we have to be mindful of those things too, to make sense of it. As if we become educated, we must make sense of it and present it to the oppressed as we learn, as Freire is arguing, as problem-solving education. So, okay, if we make this act, because I got in trouble myself, angry at ethnic groups. But you learn, well, okay, if you carry on this way, you could wind up in prison, or you could wind up dead, So sometimes our acts of rebellion will actually justify, it would appear to justify the austerity of the oppressor. He will employ more police. He will make more of a police state. He will arm up more because of the nature of our rebellion. Just like we just seen last couple of years, the riots, the destruction of stores and neighborhoods. This is an example of acting without education, proper education. And so I think he's explaining that as well. When we're experiencing these things, our response is really detrimental on where we go from there. So that educational process, as we learn this tonight, it shows even more so its importance to put things in order, or else we actually can create a more compromising position and put our backs against the wall if we react wrong. And that's what the oppressor, also the dominant class, because he's studying too. And he studies these things. And he try not to make the same mistakes. And and he's thinking of a cunning way to respond to rebellions, especially if the people are ignorant. So, this is real important for us to, take into consideration how our verbal warfare and battling the ignorance is so important in our movement. That's what the Messiah was explaining. The truth shall make you free. And and to act upon truth and to do truth is a part of the correct educational process. Well, I'll yield with that.
Yeah, even the scriptures state over in Ephesians, it says, be angry and sin not. Because, I argue that each form, like even in our modern forefathers, the more modern, like within not even a century ago, all acts of rebellion were, I argue, are stemmed off of anger, some type of anger, but it's the process in which you take with that anger that is going to either help the generation next, coming after you, or affect your movement at that point in time and theirs. Because some mistakes are made that's going to take time, maybe even a lot of time, to clean up. And so, yeah, that's why I check my boys often, and not like an angry check or nothing, but just checking their temperature, seeing where they are. Because, all we have to do is talk, and I can tell where they are. And, I can understand at some points they're angry, but I'm not seeing that anger that I had that made me go out and do things that were detrimental to my future, to my family name, to all of this type of stuff. And so, I constantly check, and, and they're getting more information as well than I did, because I'm constantly preaching and spewing at them this stuff, even if they're not accepting of it, in depth. They're still listening, and at times I know when I got them, and I'm hitting a point in them to where when they begin to ask questions, now I know that, okay, this is a portion of what I'm saying that you're interested in. And, I'm constantly checking the temperature, because I understand. I always reflect back to how I felt at their ages. And at their ages, I was something totally different. But on that, I yield, brother.
Yes, sir. No, that's some great dialogue. That's some great things to bring to the table, because our personal experiences is what allows us, especially when dealing with the youth, the youngsters, as you mentioned, with your sons, and just the youth in general, our personal experiences with addressing that anger, because it's quite natural, like you quote the scriptures, be angry and sin not. That's what you get from all that you see, all the oppression, and the Bible speaks about that, about wrath and things of that, and giving place to wrath and stuff like that. It speaks of that, you know what I mean? Because, obviously it's going to be present when you look at a society that's unjust, look at a society that's not founded upon justice and equity. And I think one time the comrade mentioned something about that. One of the comrades from the group, he mentioned how we have a legal system, but not a justice system. So because we have a legal system and not a justice system, you're going to find a lot of angry people within that society. And this is why it's ever more important to do what we're doing right now. You know what I mean? To educate ourselves, because we are part of the oppressed. I feel as though I'm a part of the oppressed, and find out what it is that I'm supposed to do. Learning these ideals, learning these teachings, learning these methods, and then how do I apply them, practically, of course. How do I apply them and really, shake some things up, stir some things up? But I'm going to get right back into it. The reading, it reads, this total emotional dependence can lead the oppressed to what Fromm calls necrophilic behavior, the destruction of life, their own or that of their oppressed fellows. It says, it is only when the oppressed find the oppressor out and become involved in the organized struggle for their liberation that they begin to believe in themselves. This discovery cannot be purely intellectual, but must also involve action, nor can it be limited to mere activism, but must include serious reflection. Only then will it be a praxis, critical and liberating dialogue, which presupposes action, must be carried on with the oppressed at whatever the stage of their struggle for liberation. The content of that dialogue can and should vary in accordance with historical conditions and the level at which the oppressed perceive reality. But to substitute monologue, slogans, and communiques for dialogue is to attempt to liberate the oppressed with the instruments of domestication. Attempting to liberate the oppressed without their reflective participation in the act of liberation is to treat them as objects which must be saved from a burning building. It is to lead them into the populist pitfall and transform them into masses which can be manipulated. And just real quick, reflecting on what Mr. Freer just mentioned, and it was a lot. I think that we actually even read a little bit of this last week, but he mentions it is only when the oppressed find the oppressor out and become involved in the organized struggle for their liberation that they begin to believe in themselves. And what do they find out is what I was questioning. And what they find out is that they can be independent. They can become human, right? Through, of course, subversion, or like he mentioned earlier in pages before, by regaining their humanity. And their humanity is regained through reflection, right? And this reflection, it almost awakens their consciousness, right? Or their awareness of what's going on around them. And when they find out that the oppressor is really dependent upon them and their labor, them and their docility, right? Or them and their
Your mic went out, brother.
internet, the with the oppressed must
Your
find.
mic had went out.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we hear you now.
Okay. Yeah, so I was saying that, I don't know why I did that, but I was saying that the oppressed, when they find out, what is it that they need to find out? They need to find out the fact that they can be independent. And actually, the oppressor is dependent upon them. He's dependent upon their labor. He's dependent upon their ignorance. He's dependent upon their docility, right? Or their lack of education in order to exploit them. So as long as they remain ignorant and they remain uneducated, as long as they remain unorganized, right? The oppressed can continue his sadist necrophilic behavior. Why? Because the oppressed have not figured him out. See, they have not figured him out that he doesn't look at them as human beings. They still believe that, the boss, me and him cool. And I mean, my job, they still think this, and they don't realize, because they're not doing analysis, of course, because the most common lay person is ignorant. So they don't necessarily see how they're being exploited. But when they do find this out, right? And I would argue that they find this out by other people within the oppressed movement or the oppressed class, the proletariat class. If we're out there doing our job, because we're finding out, we're learning, right? We're going through this metamorphosis of becoming the new man. If we're out doing our job, we're out evangelizing. The ones who have not found out the oppressor, or they have not found him out, as Mr. Freer would say in his book, that's up to us to showcase that. That's up to us to shed light on that, because a lot of people just don't know. I know a lot of people, when you bring this conversation or this education to them, it's like, yo, man, you went to college? What you talking about that for? Like, no, I just read it. Like, oh man, a lot of people, that when they hear it, they be like, what? I ain't never heard no story like that in my life. Man, yo, be what you reading. You tripping. So a lot of people, they just don't know, because of the hustle and bustle of life, right? How we're made to serve in these jobs for umpteen hours, and some of us are working two jobs, right? We're being crushed into dust, for real, for real. So a lot of us, we aren't a lot of us, I would argue, a lot of us are willfully ignorant, but a lot of us know, we just, that's not the case. We trying to survive. We're dependent upon them. But once, when we start to realize that the real dependency is on the oppressor side, he's really dependent upon us coming to work every day. He's really dependent upon us to remain ignorant and uneducated. Once, when the oppressed find that out, then they can struggle for their liberation, right? And I'm gonna keep reading on. It says,
I
this
would like,
discuss.
I would like to say too, to put emphasis on, he's put emphasis on organized struggle. And that's, even educators must understand that part, because we may get to to the point where we're talking about it to people, but we're not organizing. It's a difference. We could stimulate the thought and then move on. But it won't, no matter how much knowledge we have, and Stephanie McMillan talks about it, and how many people we tell, if we're not organizing them to bring them onto a platform, to bring them in, or discipling, to invite them in to put their hands to the plow, then it's just as useless. They just hear us, and to them, they just remember slogans and catchphrases and words. But it's important to put emphasis on organizing, because we have a lot of people out there saying what's wrong and this and that. For one thing. Two is that we have very little who's organizing on the proper platforms. I want to bring that out because he didn't just say struggle, he said organized struggle. And as educators, we got to keep that in mind. It's not just about telling a person, it's about organizing that person to come into the group, to be a part of an organized struggle. So I'll yield with that.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Elder. Because man, that's
true what he said, because as we read that, just look how just quick that skipped right over my head. Those two words, all I saw was struggle. But
yep.
He's absolutely right. He emphasized organized struggle. And then the examples that he gave, yeah, there's a bunch of slogans out here that people will say. But without that organization, no one's going to come together and work as a collective to start putting these things in effect. And that's absolutely true. Just that quick, that just slipped right over my head until he stopped it. Thank you.
Yes, sir. And that's, I would say that's right there what make the sauce, that it's an organized struggle. You know what I mean? Like, because, Ranting and Raven, Elder mentioned that just now, a lot of people is doing that. We hear that all the time. I mean, you can go on YouTube, go on Rumble, any of these platforms, and people are talking about what's going on. But that ability to be able to synchronize the people is what's truly needed. I was encouraged by the elders before, and constantly, trying to get study groups together, even if it's 2 people, even if it's 3 people, but somebody else, having them hear the message and letting them, download and letting it be programmed in their thought process, then they may be able to take it to 4 or 5 other people. You only could take it to 1, but whatever, as long as the message goes out. So that deal with organizing, you're right. Because I went right past it and I read it a couple times, but that's a big word.
But check it out though. It's because of the organized struggle for their liberation that they begin to believe in themselves. Not just the struggle, but the organized struggle, which makes them start to believe in themselves. Wow. That one word in there before struggle gave it a whole different meaning for me that quick.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Okay, and he said, I wanted to get this point too, and we can probably dialogue on this too. It says, this discovery cannot be purely intellectual, but must involve action. And I would say that this action is, organizing, right? It says, nor can be limited to mere activism, but must include serious reflection. Only then will it be a praxis, critical and liberating dialogue. So, having these conversations or these discussions, these groups that we have, like right now, we having these dialogues, this is where it all starts. This is like where the showdown is all at. And this helps us as we talk to one another. He's going to mention it as we read further in this chapter as it ends. He's going to mention how this dialogue, having this dialogue, really brings the people to this harmony where we all see each other the same. Nobody's different. You know what I mean? I mean, it's no different ethnicity groups. There's none of that. We're all the same. We're all faced with the same situation. And again, that word organize is huge, because that by us organizing, then we can have meaningful dialogue. But we can't have meaningful dialogue if we're unorganized. The whole time we'll be sitting here battling ideals and debating, et cetera, et cetera. So in order to have critical and liberating dialogue, we must be organized on one accord. So I just highlight that part because I thought that was real worthy of dialogue and us going back and forth on. Another point that I highlighted in this paragraph, it says, we talked about that last week, but to substitute monologues, slogans, and communiques for dialogues to attempt to liberate the oppressed with instruments of domestication. And I think Jude spoke on that last week. It says, attempting to liberate the oppressed without their reflective participation in the act of liberation is to treat them as objects which must be saved from a burning building. And what I got from that is that if the oppressed is not involved, and he keeps mentioning this throughout the whole book, if they're not involved every step of the way with the studying, with the like we do on Thursdays, the hearing of different testimonies, the listening to different perspectives, having this meaningful dialogue, reading these writings, reading this literature, and trying to cultivate what is that we do, how do we apply these things so we can have an effective praxis. If we allow someone else to do it, what he's saying is that it's almost like we're looking for a superhero. And by us looking for this superhero, he mentions how it puts us in that populist pitfall. In other words, we're back to the same thing. We just change poles. We're back to, a group of people, and here's a leader, and everybody's listening to them, and every way they no, that's not what the pedagogical teaching is about. It's about that everyone becomes, like the scripture tells about, a city of kings and priests, or a kingdom of kings and priests. Everybody has to have the information. Everybody has to get to that point of self-governing. But if you just listening to another person, and you listen to slogans, and you listen to propaganda from communism, then it won't be deep rooted in you. You won't be able to organize. You won't be able to struggle effectively, because it's not one with you. It's just something that you hear, and you can just point out what's wrong. But like, I remember one time I was having a conversation with the elder, and he asked me, I know it stifled me. Well, why is it wrong? You see what I'm saying? And you have to be able to, when you're having these dialogues, these critical and liberating dialogues, it's cool to say it's wrong, but if somebody should ask you, the lay person, well, why is it wrong? Can you explain it? And if you can't, just that little instance right there, it may throw a person off. So we see that it's very important that we be a part of the conversation. We be a part of the education process so we can learn. But we do our own personal studies in our private times. That way we can learn, so our organizing can be effective. So when we do go out and do our practice, or we do go out and make our attempt at bringing people in to the labor, or bringing people into labors, let me say, if questions present themselves or whatever, you know what I mean, you can be ready to give an answer, as the scriptures would say. You'll be ready to be able to show people, okay, this is how this works. And then not just show them because you're trying to become like, the man with all the answers, but no, to show them that, this is just very easy ways to look at it. This is very simple, because sometimes we overthink it because of the fact that we're dependent on the oppressor. Because everybody always asks, well, how we going to eat if we get rid of the capitalist system? How are we going to feed our kids? So when we start to come out and we answer these questions to people, because they ask these questions not because they're ignorant, but they're so dependent upon the oppressor. But when we start to give answer, and we start to give place and shine light on these questions to some people that are very hard to understand, then people will start to become, or not, like he said earlier, they'll start to find out the oppressor. They'll start to realize that, no, he's actually dependent upon us. So, this is what this whole thing is about, that I'm getting, that Mr. Freer is really encouraging us for this reflection. And this reflection is also studying, and that studying causes us to reflect more and go through how do we relate to the society at hand. But before I go on, does somebody want to bring something out, or somebody speaking?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I want to.
Oh, go ahead, brother. Go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead, bro. If you want to speak first.
I want to
No,
get
you
asked.
go ahead. I've been talking. Y'all go ahead.
Yeah, I want to ask, going back to the organization, because this is something that I think is important, because not just within the group, I'm talking about even from the past. He said, in organized struggle, it gives the people hope. Do anyone, just quickly, so we could go on, have an example of how that would look? Why? Or like a physical example of that, briefly.
I can't say a physical example, but I guess it brings hope to the oppressed because you're moving from frustration and anger to purpose once the oppressed is educated.
Right.
And
No, I mean, not to cut you off. No, I'm really, I want a physical example.
a physical side, okay.
Yeah, really, we need, I want to give a physical example so we can move on.
I would say
It's,
the Bolsheviks probably.
no, I mean among us. What we need to have among us as a physical example. Okay.
Of what
I'll explain it because of, say it again.
No, go ahead, explain it. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. What would you about to say?
No, because I'm trying to get a proper understanding of what you as a physical example of why our organization.
Yeah, like what we will have to
hope.
what we will have to show as far as organization, how a physical example of organization that will give the people hope. It would be given, it's a physical display of organized struggle.
Well, first of all, I would say that.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay, first of all, I would say that essentially we should and we better be speaking the same things, first of all. And I would also say that the example would be that the unity and which would look as a light, a shining light or love to the people. However, they would view us, they would say, those guys are ultimately together. They all speak the same thing, they're on the same page. But I don't know if I'm hitting what you're going at, but go ahead.
I think so. Sister Kaya, were you gonna say something?
Oh yeah. So when you say, okay, so give the people hope, I think I'm thinking more in terms, are you talking about the people, like say the people we talk to, or are you talking about the people who are actually organized? Like for example, NMP, like we would go out.
Yeah, it just our group itself. What would be a physical?
Well, if I take that and I think about something that would make me like give me hope and make me feel confident, is kind of what we're doing right now to be able to take this out, and let's just say whether it's pamphlets and people are coming up, they're asking questions, and we have been equipped to be able to answer those questions. We feel confident about how we can relate this to people's lives in a way that they can understand it. And when they ask questions, we're kind of ready to answer those questions, and we are actually empowered and able to do it. For me personally, I mean, that's just an example of something that I could say would give me hope. I don't know if that's the right thing, but I'm saying for me, I can see how that would be a thing, rather than say, for example, if we were out and someone came up and I'd like, oh, well, let me go ask, Brother Judah, let me go ask Brother Tim, let me go, see if I can get the answer for you. I think to be equipped to be able to answer questions, talk to people, and educate people to some degree, that would give me hope.
Yeah, I think what both of you are saying is pretty much the point that I'm going to, and that is this. The physical example that will give people hope of organized struggle is all what you have said, all of you, actually. Brother Tim, Akish, and Sister Kaya. But it is the people who's a part of a group doing work together literally. Meaning, see, we can have this idea of being together, and we have seen this where, okay, that's all on the same mind. People think that. But this been a struggle throughout the years, and the argument presented to the people is that when we go out, if we go out to go out, like, see, we say we go out, right? And I think, I can't speak of this group. I'm talking about groups in times past that I've known personally. I'm talking about within the congregation of Israel. It was extremely difficult to get people to go out at the same time. And so that's what I would say. If you see one person on a corner saying something, and then you may see another brother somewhere else by themselves doing something, that's really not an example of that's not a show of organized struggle or organization. But if you see 5 people, 10 people, if they're out together, even new people who they don't know much, but their body is there. And this is given a show of others showing these people are together, not just in word, or even when we go online, or like I noticed, to extend it, going on Clubhouse or something. Or it's a show when you have the people in the group show up. Instead of, I mean, that's what I mean. We have to make that our priority. Not, okay, we'll miss it today. If we can get there, we need to get there. If it's something going on locally, if someone is tabling and you can be there, and I don't mean, whether you feel like it or not, I'm talking about, okay, you may have to do a job or go to work, or sometimes you may call off if you know, hey, such and such time we're going to table. Because of the importance of people being together and seeing together. This is like a concrete example of organized struggle. If you see one person, they look like a mad despot. But if you're looking at several people together, that's why the Messiah was explaining 2 by 2, 2 or more witnesses. Will every word be established? This is a part of organized struggle. Your brothers and your sisters being there, not just in theory, not just in mind, not just in heart, but concretely being there. Even then, like I say, we don't have nothing to say, if you're there just to hand out a flyer, if you're there just to wear the same t-shirt or the same apparel. This is an example, a concrete example of organized struggle. And it shows others that others believe it too. And the more people they see together doing it, then that encourages them to be a part of that organized struggle. And this has been examples throughout, histories and movements. When they seen the Black Panthers together, whether it's 4 or 5 of them, they were standing together on the corner. Then it gets people's attention. And I think if we think of that ourselves, you walk down the street tomorrow, you see 4 or 5 people or 8, 9 people on a corner somewhere. They may have all the same t-shirt, they have clipboards. Wouldn't that get your attention?
Yes, sir.
So I want to bring that out because it's overlooked. It's been overlooked in our experiences. Whereas you had to wrestle with people. And I don't like doing that. You're going to go out because you want to go out, not because I told you. But the point being is when you have the people on the same page, listen, we tabling, I'm going to be there. We would do Juneteenth here. And all of a sudden people got a damn summer vacation to go to. I can't argue against your summer vacation. I can't take that away from you. But in my mind, you're underestimating the power of people being there at the table at the same time. And that will frustrate me. But I can't get in the way of, I can't take away what you want. That's what you have to do. You have to put priorities in order. But just those experiences, half the group gone because it's the summer and they got some type of damn trip to go on, and I'm saying that just to voice a little bit of my frustration, because when I see that, we want things and we say things, but we got to be ready to go through and take the necessary steps to achieve it. And that's where he's talking about this praxis. So it's not just in book, he's right. It's not just in activism. They both go together. And that's what he's saying. Listen, our praxis is when you see, okay, if it's the NMP, you got several people together, or not more, organized, clipboards together, representing, as they will say. So I want to bring that out just to bring it to our attention because that's essential in organized struggle. So I'll yield.
Hey, and what else? I find myself now, like when we all on Clubhouse or wherever we may be, or if we in class or whatever, and the people are able to see us in class, whatever the situation dictates. I'm always finding myself looking to see how many of the comrades are actually there, because I feel better when we stand in there in support of who's ever speaking, whether it's Brother Tim, whether it's you. And like the other day when Brother Nashawn came on and gave such an excellent lesson, that was
Can you call them?
that gave me some good hope, because I'm starting to see that we're all beginning to be able to articulate this message in an organized manner, and to where we've got each other back. If it's just us in the classroom, if nobody got each other's back, I know the NMP and their comrades have their back.
Right.
And so that gave me some, I felt pretty good about that, especially the other night when Brother Nashawn was teaching, because I even saw and noticed when you left out, Brother Judah, and I was like, look, we got this, and that felt pretty good.
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Online appearances. Everyone, if we're going to be there, we got to have not just one person representing. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. It goes so far. It's a necessity. And we have to understand that necessity as well as our book reading, because this shows to other people we're organized. And we don't want to just do it for a show. We doing it because we are. But just bringing out tonight, this is the important part, that attendance, that being there, because this goes a long way. That's a part of the praxis, bringing our bodies there, bringing our, being attendant. This is very, very important. Other than that, we just like this, okay, we're together in heart. That person come in, that's not going to gather people confidence. So if it's gathering your confidence, same here. When I see the people organized and set up, this is whether it's online and whether we're tabling and we see other comrades come down to the park or to the street. They got flyers, they got literature, people waiting at tables. That display itself is powerful and it gets people attention. And I believe it's underestimated, and people have to realize the importance of it. If we want the kingdom, it's important for us to perform those displays. If we don't, then we're not going to produce much, because people are going to look, oh, it's just one person there. Sometimes it's two, or, that's not going to, we'll be just running in a circle. So that organized struggle, the depth of what he's saying, involves us being in attendance to what's going on, whether physically, online. We have to make that effort if we're going to produce anything. And that's the part of praxis. People say, well, what can we do? This is it. This is the beginning. What we learning, attend, be there. I'll yield.
Yes, sir. I agree. Oh, the Tim, that you had something to say? I think your mic was unmuted.
Oh yeah, no, I agree. I agree. 'Cause I know I need to find myself out there in the summertime more myself, because in times past the brother's not saying anything wrong, definitely not lying, because it's the sheer fact of strength in numbers. And when you have bodies out there, people do gravitate to that. People do move toward it. And I think it all moves. Everything you talk, I got in the conversation late because I got in. But everything was said, I agree with. Like I said, people out there, they angry, they frustrated, and then you lead them to education. But when they see a body of people moving in unison on one accord, that's a powerful thing. I mean, that's what Yahweh Ben Yahweh did in Miami. That's what basically the Nation of Islam did. They moved in unison. And all groups, when you see them together, whether they're together, like I said, Black Panthers, is having that group that they know they can go out and see, even like I said, online is very important too. But out in the streets, bodies on the ground is very important. Is that show. People do gravitate to that. Because that's the fact. That's what I gravitated to when I was young. When I seen the Moses on the corner, I gravitated to that. And then when the conversation and the dialogue matches up, you know, more people will gravitate. Lord will. I mean, out of the will of the Lord, everything done by His will. But doing those things and taking those steps is very important. It's all a part of the protocol of revolution. You know what I mean? Like you said, you got one here, one day, two here. People are gonna be kind of, that might come off kind of suspect. But when you see the people out, you know, they'll take what we're saying seriously, as long as we stay committed and we stay thorough being out here. And I yield.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I agree. What you call it? That's one of my main things as far as like organizing. I know everything takes its time, but I want to organize in order to, bring more people into the conversation and the discussion. I try my best on Clubhouse because, you don't need no passcodes or nothing like that. So I know not comrades, I know his brothers and sisters off of my feed that they come and stop by. But like Ak was mentioning, is real encouraging when people come and show up and like, they're guests. And, they see the whole board lit up and it says, followed by speakers. You see Elder Tim, you see Aleph and other brothers inside there. All of us be up on stage and stuff like that. Cause that's how these other rooms be. You know what I mean? They be having a captains in there and it's very important. And to me, I think that what always keeps me in that regiment is I got like a routine. Monday is Monday night Bible study with Elder Tim. So I'm just talking about for the sake of the NMP. Once when you start to follow that regiment, Monday, I'm there, boom. Even if I can't, always follow the teaching because I'm doing something, I'm there. And then I may ask questions or I'm taking notes or I even record it sometimes myself. Well, I used to, but not anymore because I gotta hook my laptop up, well, it's a long story, but nonetheless though, whatchamacallit, yeah, just starting that weekly regiment with Monday all the way to the Sabbath day and constantly be in attendance because I also realized that so much information is coming out. Elder Tim was talking about on Monday. I don't want to get away from the reading, but I mentioned this to the other elder, how he was talking about the leaven and how the leaven is an influencer. And if I ain't come in on that Monday, I would have missed that because he was telling me how it was a conversation going on actually on the Sabbath about the leaven being an influencer with Elder Judah, and I didn't hear it. I just didn't hear it on Saturday. So if I didn't come on Monday, I wouldn't hear it. I mean, that information like really opened my eyes. It really was making me, all this week look at leaven and yeast and stuff like that in our food and how it relates to health, all kind of different stuff like that. I mean, how this leaven, it is a great influencer for different diseases, diabetes and stuff like that. So, I was just looking at some different things, but that's what it's about though. This attendance and this pedagogy, this education, when you're always there engaging in the information, you're learning more. And then, of course the support, but the main thing, you're learning more. So like Sister Tanya was saying that is that when we are outside, it's cool at a certain point to say, well, let me go ask the elder, but I got that information because I came to all the classes. I was studying, I was engaging with the literature, I was struggling with it, I was reading it, you know what I mean? And therefore, I can stand on my own too, to a certain extent, you know what I mean? Because that's the reward of studying. You go to school and you take a test and you study for it and you pass it. So I feel as though like the test is when we go outside and you're trying to persuade or evangelize brothers and sisters to come into the doors. That's the test. And either you're gonna get an A or you're gonna get a D. You know what I mean? I know we all like A's. I like the A pluses. You know what I mean? So it's definitely important for to be in attendance and always to be around the literature and center ourselves around it. Like I know Mr. Freer mentioned in the book that this has to become our occupation and preoccupation. So we have to always be, enthralled and engulfed with the literature, with the teachings, you know what I mean? Whether it be old replays from the clubhouse or old lessons from the Zooms, whatever. We have to always have it in our minds going through it because it's important. And I mean, to become fully, because indoctrinated in it with, because when we see the capitalists, that's what they do to their propaganda. They're making people totally submerged in it. They push the fast food commercials. They push the perverted magazines. They push the making money and get rich stock markets. I mean, whatever it is that they into, they make sure that they push it. They make sure it's in your face. You going downtown and you see their perversion come past on the side of a bus, you know what I mean, on a public bus, you know what I mean. They make sure that you see what it is that because they're trying to indoctrinate you. So, you know, the ideal is to indoctrinate ourselves with this information because, you know, I think it's ultimately what saves our lives and other people's lives. You know what I mean? But yeah, I'll continue on. Did anybody else want to add something to that or bring anything else out? Okay, no worries. I'll keep going. It says at the bottom of this page, it says, at all stages of their liberation, the oppressed must see themselves as women and men engaged in the ontological and historical vocation of becoming more fully human. Real quick, I just wanted to get that definition of vocation and ontological, because when I read it, I was trying to really gather the thought. And ontological is just going into, it's a noun, it's going into a branch of metaphysics concerned with the nature and relations of being, particularly theory about the nature of being or the kinds of things that have existence. And then that word vocation. And I'm just doing this so I can get a better grasp of the sentence because the language is unfamiliar with me, unfamiliar to me, excuse me. Vocation was talking about a summons or strong inclination to a particular state or course of action, an entry into the priesthood or religious order, the work in which a person is employed, the specific function of an individual or group. So, you know, when reading that, we see that they had to see themselves engaged in this ontological or this existence, right? This state of being and historical and vocational, or as I just read, uh, uh, a strong inclination, particular state of course of action, right? Of becoming more fully human. So they have to have like this fervent passion to become more human. Again, they have to be occupied and preoccupied with it. They have to be totally submerged in it. And I mean, it's something that we just had that dialogue about the attendance, and then we had that dialogue because this is what he's saying. And I mean, we have to be, in order to become fully human, or in order to liberate ourselves, right? Critical reflection, all these things as well. But we also have to, you know, go through these processes. We have to always be taking action, ready to take action, always be submerged in study. I'm sorry, Elder Tim. Go ahead, sir. I'm sorry. Forgive me. Oh, Elder Tim, you were saying something? I don't know why it showed up, but let me keep going. I'm sorry. Forgive me for that. I saw your icon on. I thought you were speaking. Forgive me. Okay, it says reflection and action become imperative when one does not erroneously attempt to dichotomize the content of humanity from its historical forms. The existence that the oppressed engaged in reflection on their concrete situation is not a call to armchair revolution. On the contrary, reflection, true reflection, leads to action. On the other hand, when the situation calls for action, that action will constitute an authentic praxis. And when I first saw that, well, I'll keep going. But when I first saw that, I like when it says that the insistence that the oppressed engage in reflection on their concrete situation is not a call to armchair revolution. Meaning, like, it's not going to happen with us sitting down. You know, you hear the expression, "I won't take this sitting down." Well, exactly. This is not going to take place with us just sitting there down and lounging around. No, it says, on the contrary, reflection, true reflection, leads to action. It animates us. It makes us move out. It makes us go forward, right? It says, on the other hand, when the situation calls for action, that action will constitute an authentic praxis only if its consequences become the object of critical reflection. So that action will only happen if we have critical reflection, right? If we become aware on how we have a relation to this society, how our actions, our previous actions as the old man have established this dysfunctional social order, right? It says, in this sense, the praxis is the new raison d'etre of the oppressed.
and the revolution, which inaugurates the historical moment of this raison d'entrée, is not viable apart from their concomitant conscious involvement. And real quick, I just wanted to get, well, I'll keep reading and I'm gonna get that about the raison d'entrée. I think I read it last week, but I wanted to bring that back out again. And I'm also going to define that word common content. Okay, but it says otherwise.
Are you speaking? If not, your mic went out.
My mic went out.
Yes.
I don't know why it's doing that. Okay, I don't know why it's doing it. Let me start over. It says to achieve this praxis. Can you guys hear me? I sound
Yeah.
good? Yes, sir. I don't know why I did that. Okay, thank you, Elder. It says to achieve this praxis, however, it is necessary to trust in the oppressed and in their ability to reason. Whoever lacks this trust will fail to initiate or will abandon dialogue, reflection, and communication, and will fall into using slogans, communiques, monologues, and instructions. Superficial conversions to the cause of liberation carry this danger. Political action on the side of the oppressed must be pedagogical action in the authentic sense of the word, and therefore action with the oppressed. Those who work for liberation must not take advantage of the emotional dependence of the oppressed, dependence that is the fruit of the concrete situation of domination, which surrounds them and which engendered their unauthentic view of the world. Using their dependence to create still greater dependence is an oppressor tactic. Libertarian action must recognize this dependence as a weak point and must attempt through reflection and action to transform it into independence. However, not even the best intentioned leadership can bestow independence as a gift. The liberation of the oppressed is is a liberation of women and men, not things. Accordingly, while no one liberates himself by his own efforts alone, neither is he liberated by others. Liberation, a human phenomenon, cannot be achieved by semi-humans. And real quick, before I go into the next paragraph, what I liked about this page here is when he mentioned, on the other hand, when the situation calls for action. Well, no, I wanted to actually, yeah, when the situation calls for action, that action will constitute an authentic praxis only if its consequences become the objects of critical reflection. He says, in this sense, the praxis is the new raison d'entrée of the oppressed. And just for like sake of clarity, I wanted to get that because I had that already, but I wanted to show the listeners, the audience, what does it mean. I mean, it's spelled a little different here. We see it's a Latin word, but I'm going to get it again. I thought I had it. But I do have it
What you
actually. Matter of
talking
fact.
about? You talking about raison d'etre?
Yeah.
Yeah, it means the most important reason or purpose.
Exactly. And the reason why I wanted to bring that out is because um in other words, when he says that on the other hand, when the situation calls for action, the action will constitute an authentic praxis only if consequence becomes the objective reflection. It says in this sense, the praxis is the whole reason or purpose of the oppressed. So in other words, this form of becoming human, right? This has to be the whole reason of our purpose. We're not doing this because we're trying to be leaders or we're trying to, none of that. The whole reason is because we're trying to fully become human. That's what I got from what Mr. Freire was mentioning. What he meant by that is that's why it has to be the center of our focus, not because we want to sound good or not because we want to look good or like others mentioned. Because I know it's good that we all stand in solidarity with the same shirts and all that, but it's not about none of that superficial stuff. It's not about nothing baneful. No, we're really doing this because we're seeking after freedom and liberation, and that freedom and liberation has to be the apple of our eye. So when that becomes the apple of our eye, organizing and other things will become, nothing. It become a breeze because we all are on the same accord. We all feel as though that no, everything else takes a back seat and this is the total apple of my eye: liberation and freedom. Okay, so I'm glad Elder just pulled that for me, so I can just skip right through that. Okay, and because he made it real quick for me instead of me having to look it up. Also, what I wanted to bring up is at the middle of the paragraph where he mentions dependence, that is the fruit of the concrete situation of domination, which surrounds them and which engendered their unauthentic view of the world. And that's what we was talking about earlier, how the oppressed, they depend on the oppressor, right? And he mentions how that who's ever involved with this liberation of the oppressed, as far as regard themselves as a leader, they cannot take this attribute of the oppressed and exploit it or use it as a weakness against them, because that's something that they naturally, have gotten due to their exploitation in this old, not this old, right, at least for now, but in this particular society, we become dependent. As we become oppressed, we look more to the rulers or the elite class to fix our situations and problems. So we'll still have that mentality as we're starting to, well, not us, but as we start to educate others, you'll find others with that mentality that they're dependent. They're looking at their leaders for all the answers. They're looking at their leaders for whatever it is, because that's like a natural attribute that the oppressed class have. They really don't study much. They don't have education. A lot of them are just, in that mindset of work, 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 feed their children, feed themselves, and that's it. So, they don't have that time. They haven't taken the time to study or to investigate and research. So when we dealing with them, we may come across them and they may have that personality, or, they may have that issue where as though they're just totally dependent. And I mean, they have that Butler syndrome almost. They're waiting on, hand and foot what to do. No, what we have to do is we have to encourage them to educate and study, to join in the discussions. Whatever books we reading, you grab those books too, you order them and you read them for yourself, and you have to become more involved in educating yourself as long with others, the other comrades, so that way you won't be dependent. You can become independent. And that's what he mentioned earlier. He goes on to say, and I'll keep reading. Did anybody want to add something to that? Okay.
No,
Well,
you could go for it, because you got about 3 pages left.
I do.
Yes.
Oh yeah, you're right.
When you count your page, you just can't count the page. You got to count front and back.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Okay. So let me thank you, sir. Thank you. So let me go ahead. It says at the bottom, any attempt to treat people as semi-humans only dehumanizes them. When people are already dehumanized due to the oppression they suffer, the process of their liberation must not employ methods of dehumanization. Again, making them like they're less than, human beings, almost like animals, right? He says the correct method for revolutionary leadership to employ the task of liberation is therefore not libertarian propaganda, nor can the leadership merely implant in the oppressed a belief in freedom, thus thinking to win their trust. The correct method lies in dialogue, the conviction of the oppressed that they must fight for their liberation is not a gift bestowed by the revolutionary leadership, but the result of their own consciousness, ziako. And that's just basically consciousness, or it goes into awareness if you look the word up on Google Translate. And what's interesting is he said that, leadership merely implant in the oppressed a belief of freedom, thus thinking to win their trust. The correct method lies in dialogue. What we're doing right now, what we always do, is this dialogue, not by, giving people slogans and stuff like that. No, it's real meaningful dialogue to cause them to reflect and take action. Okay, but it says the revolutionary leaders must realize that their own conviction of the necessity for struggle, an indispensable dimension of revolutionary wisdom, was not given to them by anyone else. If it is authentic, right? This conviction cannot be packaged and sold. It is reached rather by means of totality of reflection and action. Only the leader's own involvement in reality within an historical situation led them to criticize the situation and wish to change it. Likewise, the oppressed who do not commit themselves to the struggle unless they are convinced and who, if they do not make such a commitment, withhold the indispensable condition for this struggle, must reach this conviction as subjects, not as objects. They also must intervene critically in the situation which surrounds them and whose mark they bear. And earlier he mentions this mark that they bear is the mark of oppression, right? He mentions that on page, well, in my book is page 36. They bear this mark of oppression. Propaganda cannot achieve this, while the conviction of the necessity for struggle, without which the struggle is unfeasible, is indispensable to the revolutionary leadership. Indeed, it was this conviction which constituted that leadership. It it is also necessary for the oppressed. It is necessary, that is, unless one intends to carry out the transformation for the oppressed rather than with them. It is my belief that only the latter form of transformation is valid. The object in presenting these considerations is to defend the eminently pedagogical character of the revolution. The revolutionary leaders of every epoch who have affirmed that the oppressed must accept the struggle for their liberation, an obvious point, have also thereby implicitly recognized the pedagogical aspect of this struggle. Many of these leaders, however, perhaps due to natural and understandable biases against pedagogy, have ended up using the educational methods employed by the oppressor. They deny pedagogical action in the liberation process, but they use propaganda to convince, right? It says it is essential for the oppressed to realize that when they accept the struggle for humanization, they also accept from that moment their total responsibility for the struggle. They must realize that they are fighting not merely for freedom from hunger, but for freedom to create and to construct, to wonder and to venture. Such freedom requires that the individual be active and responsible, not a slave or a well-fed cog in the machine. It is not enough that men are not slaves. If social conditions further the existence of automatons, the result will not be love of life, but love of death. Again, that's that necrophilic sadist, situation. I only got one page left, Elder, on the other side. So I'm just going to read the bottom of this because I wanted to bring out something real quick before 11 o'clock hits, about that automaton thing. But real quick, I'm gonna finish this page, and then because all I have left is 3 paragraphs on the other side, and they're short paragraphs. It says, the oppressed who have been shaped by the death affirming climate of oppression must find through their struggle the way to life affirming humanization, which does not lie simply in having more to eat, although it does involve having more to eat and cannot fail to include this aspect. The oppressed have been destroyed precisely because their situation has reduced them to things. In order to regain their humanity, they must cease to be things and fight as men and women. This is a radical requirement. They cannot enter the struggle as objects in order later to become human beings, right? I like that part too. I want to speak about that, but keep going. It says the struggle begins with men's recognition that they have been destroyed, propaganda, management, manipulation, all arms of domination cannot be the instruments of their rehumanization. The only effective instrument is a humanizing pedagogy in which the revolutionary leadership establishes a permanent relationship of dialogue with the oppressed. In a humanizing pedagogy, the method ceases to be an instrument by which the teachers, in this instance, the revolutionary leadership, can manipulate the students in this instance. The oppressed, because it expresses the consciousness of the students themselves. And I'll just finish this up so I can go back and take my time. It's only 10:33. So it says, the method is, in fact, the external form of consciousness manifests in acts, which takes on the fundamental property of consciousness is intentionality. The essence of consciousness is being with the world, and this behavior is permanent and unavoidable. Accordingly, consciousness is in essence a way towards something apart from itself, outside itself, which surrounds it and which it apprehends by means of ideational capacity. Consciousness is thus by definition a method in the most general sense of the word. I like that. Consciousness is thus by definition a method in the most general sense of the word. So consciousness itself is a way, or is a tool. It is a method of this teaching, this consciousness, this critical reflection. It is the method. It is a part of the pedagogy. It is a part of the teaching, the science of this teaching, the awakening of the consciousness. It says a revolutionary leadership must accordingly practice co-intentional education. Teachers and students, leadership and people, co-intent on reality are both subjects, not only in the task of unveiling that reality and thereby coming to know it critically, but in the task of recreating that knowledge as they attain this knowledge of reality through common reflection and action. There go those two terms again. It says they discover themselves as its permanent recreators. In this way, the presence of the oppressed and the struggle for their liberation will be what it should be, not pseudo participation, but committed involvement. And it was a lot said, and that's the end of my reading for and that's the end of chapter 1 as well. But I just wanted to go back really quickly here so we can also open up and talk for a second. But he had mentioned Mr. Freire. It was a lot of things I wanted to bring out. But
Before you go, just real quick, I don't know if you're going to touch on it or not. His closing sentence of that chapter is what we were saying earlier, or the point trying to be brought out order. You see, he says, the presence of the oppressed in the struggle for their liberation will be what it should be, not pseudo participation. That's that idea. Okay, we're all together in heart,
in spirit. Yeah.
But he said a committed involvement. Be there. You know, I mean, this is what I was trying to express earlier. Yeah. So I'll yield.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I also like the part real quick where it says consciousness is thus by definition a method in the most general sense of the word. And what I got from that, because I know when you read the definition of pedagogy, it's a method of teaching, right? So consciousness is a method within the teaching, meaning that your awareness. So in order to be aware, that's one of the methods in becoming a human again. But you only can become aware through self-reflection, because the self-reflection is what allows you to take action. So the consciousness is, if you synthesize the consciousness or the awareness is right in the middle of the teaching. Because it's one thing to read it, and like he said, you know, you get the slogans and you get stuff like that, but still you won't be aware, because if you don't study it, or if you, like it mentioned about the ontological, the ontology, if you don't look at the existence, if you don't study the word, well, not ontology, but epistemology, that's what co-intentional goes into. When you look up the word co-intent or co-intentional, intent goes into existence, and you go and look at that, and the synonym for it would be epistemological or epistemology. And when we go into that epistemology, you start to see that, okay, now this consciousness, right, or this awareness, it goes into your state of being. And your state of being what? Being aware of what's going on. That don't happen by just listening to discussions. No, you become aware by you actually processing the information, and you reading the information, and by you having praxis, or what's it called? You're demonstrating, or you're organizing, you're learning from the things that you're doing. So, in my case, if I'm trying to get a couple of guys, get a couple of tow truck drivers together, I'm giving them flyers. I keep giving them little messages at the gas station and stuff like that. Hey, look, man, come on these classes. I'm learning from having dialogues with people think, and it's making me aware. You see what I'm saying? Of people's hangups and holdups, people's fears, people's disagreements, because this is a part of organizing, or having an organized struggle, so that we can be effective. So I thought that was real dope that he mentioned that, how consciousness or that awareness is a method. But really quick, he brought out, and I wanted to get something out of Miss Macmillan's book, Capitalism Must Die. But she, man, I just had it, man. Come on, don't do this to me. He had brought out, he mentioned something about the oh, here we go. It says, I'm not sure what it is on you guys' page, but it says, it is not enough that men are not slaves. If social conditions further the existence of automatons, the result will not be love of life, but love of death. And real quick, when we read Miss Macmillan's book, she had mentioned something of this effect. I just want to get it real quick to talk about these automatons real quick. She had mentioned, I'm going to skip through, but she had mentioned there has been increasing conflict with the capitalist class over the character of current and future growth. Concrete surplus extracted from labor power on the one hand versus on the other hand, fictitious forms that are increasingly unstable. Money makes more money, but no material value through debt, deficit, speculation, arbitrage, and by simply printing more of it. Okay, next page. It says, this seems to throw production along with the workers. I'm just following the thought of he's saying, it just creates automatons is promoting destruction of life, or this necrophilic thing. So she says, this seems to throw production along with workers and consumers out of the equation. They don't appear to need us so much anymore. This is reflected in our high unemployment rate and falling incomes. In the US, mainly due to automation or automatons, right? And she mentions, real quick, it's the last part I wanted to make. She mentions financial collapse has happened many times before, and it will again, it causes chaos, right? Because we go into this, state of necrophilia, the love of death again. Once when we keep going with these automations and stuff like that. And he was talking about how really quick to get the thought, he was talking about how the result will not be love of life, but love of death, right? Because financial collapses have happened. Because remember, he's going to mention it. Watch this. He's going to say it. It says financial collapses, excuse me, Ms. Millen's going to say it. Financial collapse has happened many times before, and it will again. It causes chaos and shakeups. Business interests, large and small, fell, increasing the suffering of the majority of people who are trapped inside and dependent on the economy. Remember, Mr. Freire mentioned how the oppressed have this dependency to the oppressor. So when he talks about this love of death, if we keep going on the existence of automatons or automations, this love of death happens. Why? Because remember, the oppressed was dependent upon the oppressor. But as the chaos ensues because financial collapses, what happens? The people are all out of order. So now these people who were once just objects to the oppressors, and now a lot of them who aren't educated, we read how Mr. Freire was speaking in reference to the oppressed had that duality, and they tend to turn on each other and start to brutalize each other. They start to have the same mentality that the oppressor has, that each other are just things and they're inanimate objects, right? Because they internalize the ways of the oppressors. So they start to have this same kind of perspective on the world, that nobody's life means anything, right? And in this financial collapse, we're all dependent on this economy. And it says growth based on real concrete value can fundamentally only be achieved by constantly increasing the rate of exploitation, the extraction of surplus value from the working class. To this end, industrial capital is using financial crisis, high unemployment, inflated food and energy prices, and global structural adjustment, austerity measures to put tremendous pressure on an increasingly desperate working class or the oppressed. Their aim is to force workers to accept the sub-survival. Remember, sub-survival, I mean, you're barely living, almost dead, right? Sub-survival wages and atrocious working conditions that come with these industrial jobs. And I just wanted to bring that point out because he had mentioned if we continue this existence with automatons or automations, the result will not be love of life, but love of death, because what it will do is it'll create these hell-like conditions where everybody is dog eat dog, people are out of work, and then we'll all start going into, God willing, it doesn't happen that way, but if we continue that way, people will start, especially people that are uneducated, they have the ways of the oppressor. We know quite naturally what they're going to do. It's going to start fighting. Mr. Freire mentioned that how they start fighting each other, the natives, and they start cutting each other's throats. And because they have the sentiment of the oppressor because they're dependent upon the oppressor. That's all they know. So as these automatons come in, these automations, and they keep, pushing that, self-checkouts and all this other kind of business, and we're dependent on this economy. We can't get our jobs no more. If we can't work and we can't feed our families, which thing's going to happen? It's going to be a love of death outside, a necrophilic sadist behavior outside. So it's just a lot that we have to do, and we're doing it as we engage in these readings and have these discussions. But for me, I'm going to say it again.
I want to ask something. What you're saying is true as well.
Yes, sir.
But the extended as well, it leads into, I believe what he's also saying, or what he's saying here in reference to automaton, he's making reference to people who act in a mechanical or unemotional way. That's what he's explaining. They're just going they're going through. They're really not human in a sense. They're just going through the motions. And
okay, I got you.
Okay. So that's what he's saying here. If we're just a part of the machine with no emotions, we just going through the mechanical motions of things without any emotions to it, then he's arguing that we will not be a part of the love of, we will not love life, but love death, because we're not really dialoguing for us to understand. It's like getting back into this deposit type of education. We're just going through the motions. There's nothing, no depth to it. There's no emotional type of understanding, any depth to what we're doing. We're just going through the motions or through the mechanics or mechanism.
No, thank you, Elder, because you absolutely right when it says something, when it says that the individual be active and responsible, not a slave or a well-fed cog in the machine. Okay, I get it now. The thought that he was making said it is not enough that men are not slaves. Okay, I get it. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you for that, Elder, because man, I'm gonna highlight that too right now as we speaking. That way, I'm gonna put like a little marker that way, because I had it geared towards another thought, and then when I was reading, Miss McMillan's book, I'm like, oh, okay, that's what she meant by that. But now I'm just gonna put a marker there and write something in there. But no, thank you, Elder. I appreciate it. Did anybody else want to bring something out? I'm sorry. Anybody else want to bring something out or add anything to what was said, or want me to go back, or want to, have a little dialogue? Okay, I was right there. Okay, yeah. So, no worries. Yes. So we completed chapter 1. We'll be at chapter 2 next Thursday. We'll have another reader, another comrade, a great sister Tanya, and whatchamacallit, we're gonna keep, pounding this thing out, keep examining it, and as we examine it and as we look at it, apply what I know at least speaking for myself, apply what I'm reading to the best of my ability every day. Whether I'm at work or not at work, and I mean whatever I'm doing, apply what I'm reading from all of these different scholars to my life. That way I can be an effective witness. That way that we can inherit God's kingdom, because I believe this is all a part of it. Doing this work, doing the work of, as far as bringing in a society that's founded upon peace, that's founded upon justice and equity, that's fair and upright, no robbery, no defrauding. And this is where it all starts at. This is where it all happens. Mr. Freire is arguing the same thing. This new man, he must emerge. And when the new man emerges, he is therefore set with the task to liberate himself and others. But in order to become that new man, he must go through that reflection. He must rid himself of the duality in his mind of wanting to be like the oppressor. No, because the oppressor is not human. The oppressor himself is actually dehumanized as well. So he has to go through this process or this metamorphosis to become fully human and rid himself of all these different bacteria, if you will, or germs and infections in order to become this true human being, not an object. You heard he said we have to approach the revolution, or we have to approach liberation and freedom, not as objects, but as subjects. You know what I mean? So we have to really identify who we are. We're not oppressed, no, but we're men and women struggling for liberation. But with that, I close and I yield. Thank you so much for having me as a reader, a COI, NMP. I appreciate it. It's always a pleasure. And I can't wait till next Thursday so we can get right back into this, man, and just, keep learning and keep educating ourselves. But with that, I yield.
Hey, good. I just want to say, great job on your portion, man. I like the breakdowns of some of the stuff you were giving, and the way you made us think. So, good job on your read.
Oh, thank you, brother. Y'all all praises to the Almighty, man, for allowing me to have, eyes to see and a mind to think, and allowing me to be a part of you guys, interjecting and say, hey, brother Brian, this and the third and the other, because that's what really makes it all worthwhile. The other comrades, that family, that fellowship of the sister and the brother, and that's what really make it worthwhile. Because it's like, oh, yo, I can talk to you because you see what I'm seeing and you agree and you in agreement with it. So that's what always, makes it exciting to constantly show up in dialogue and have these discussions, because you can't find everybody on a a normal basis that have read Miss Macmillan or have read the Communist Manifesto. You can't find people like that in today's society. At least in Philly, you don't talk to too many people that have read this kind of literature. So to be able to meet with you guys and you guys say, no, let me correct you on that, brother, I see this. Elder Judah do it all the time. Like, no, I see this. And I mean, like, to me, like, that goes into when the scriptures talks about admonishing one another. And that's great, man, because, I feel as though that this right here is, if the Most High allows us to do his will, and not allows us to do his will, but allows us to bring forth his kingdom, and we're underneath his will, I feel as though this right here is the church. This right here is the body that he speak of. And not just only, I'm saying that NMP exclusively, but I'm saying that it's a part of that body that I read in the text. You know what I mean? Well, at least if the Almighty be generous and merciful, that we could be that representation of that body, or we are that representation of that body. But I mean, what the characters and the personalities that I find here at the school, man, it's just great. Man, I couldn't ask for a better congregation or a better organization to be a part of. So yeah, I appreciate it, and it's all praises to the Most High for allowing me to be able to come here with my health and my strength, and I mean, just be enthusiastic and excited about reading. You know what I mean? But yes, sir, I think I appreciate it, brother, and thank you all. Thank you all.
Yeah, we appreciate it. I think you did an excellent job as well in bringing it out clear, bringing out the good points. So yeah, I enjoyed it. Where Sister Kaya, do you know your page lengths from what page to page? I can't recall what
Yeah,
copy you have.
I have page 71 through page 71 through 77, I think. Hold on one second, let me look. Because let me see. Let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, it ends on page 77.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, yep. At the very bottom, that very bottom paragraph ends with a period, so that is the end.
All right.
Yeah. So I'll probably be asking, because I know, Brother Judah, when we start, you always, I know how you started, and you like us to, I guess, introduce the NMP ourselves in a certain way. I probably have to kind of have you go, just make sure that I'm clear on how I'm supposed to do that.
Okay, yes, no problem at all.
Yeah.
Yep, we can go over it. Just let me know how.
Okay.
We could talk about how to do the intro.
Okay.
Yep.
And then also now next Thursday, could I just get I guess just joining in the meeting early just to make sure, because you're like, somebody else will be recording and stuff, right? Is that what
We
it-
could, yes, we
Okay.
could.
Okay.
Because I
Okay.
don't know if you want to screen share anything. You know, you could let me know by the week if it's something you diagram or anything you may want to screen share.
Okay.
Then we'll make you co-host.
Okay.
And then once, if you're a co-host or a host, then you can start the recording yourself.
Okay.
That's probably what I would do, because when you're ready to start, we'll know. So I don't
Okay.
have to necessarily say, okay, go ahead, but you could just click the button and you'll know when you're ready.
Okay. All right. I will definitely, we'll definitely be talking soon.
Okay, sound good to me.
Okay.